Now that our servos are all centered up, before we glue them in, we're going to go ahead and install our control horns. Now because of this being plywood, I don't want to strip any layers, but we wanted to keep this all together. Just drag your razor blade right over top of it. That way it comes apart nice and neat. This is a good tip whether you're building a scratch build or a kit of any manufacturer. Always look at their tabs, and if you want a nice clean finish, just drag over the blade just a little bit. Now in the kit we have these push rods. These are 0.039 inch wire, and the hole will receive the push rod just like so. Let's go ahead and pre-install these guys. Now to open up these grooves here, take your barbecue skewer and pass it through, pointing in first, just so your push rods don't bind on this. Now you're going to notice here, as we pass this through, there's a simple groove cut into the foam. We're simply going to press this down through and open up that groove. Make sure that we have no binding and no issues, and that it moves freely. Once you're happy with the push rod still installed, we don't want to leave this off. Go ahead and put a little drop of glue down. On our bigger planes, we use linkage stoppers and we pass the push rods through afterwards. We do it this way to save on weight and keep things simple. Also keeps you from putting your control horns in backwards. Go back again, make sure we're happy with the throw. We're going to repeat the exact same process with the elevator now. At this point we're going to go ahead and prepare our servos. Now for this you want to take time once again to make sure your wing does not get blocked from passing through the fuselage. So keep in mind where you're putting this, but you do want to bring this far forward towards the center of gravity, which on this wing is right by the CG. So we want to move the servos as far forward as we possibly can, closest to the CG, without blocking that cavity. The smaller your servos, the further forward you can go. Once you're in this area here, it doesn't really matter nearly as much. But if you install your servos back towards the tail, you're going to have to compensate with a lot of weight. That being said, these push rods are going to cross each other, just like so. Now one tool, if you guys don't have already, I'd highly recommend you getting is a pair of Z-benders. We can have a link down below. Lots of different manufacturers making them. If not, you can bend them with pliers. You just got to do one bend at a time, and you got to have very strong, rigid pliers to do it well. That being said, we're going to go ahead and take these as far forward as possible. And looking at where the servo goes, this is about the point where I can move it forward. So I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to go just ahead of that, and I'm going to cut these guys right now. You don't have to get these exactly right, because we're just going to glue them where they center. Now at this point we're ready to go ahead and install our servos, but we do need to do a Z-bend. We're simply going to take our Z-bend pliers, bend them down, take our servo, pass it through the servo arm. A little rotational force will help. And at this point we're going to go ahead and do a practice run to make sure everything is good. I'm simply going to let this fall towards the bottom. Keep in mind you're going to have to use your fingers on both sides. I want to make sure when this is fully down, this is neutral, that this area is clean and can pass straight through. At this point I'm going to go ahead and take this up. It's not a bad idea to take a little bit of sandpaper, scuff up this area, because the glue is going to be holding on it, and this plastic is quite fatty, which means oily, and oily doesn't stick well. Once we have that, a little bit of glue, drop it down in, and then repeat that process where we're centering up your servo. This is why it's so important to center your servos ahead of time. Now we can simply drop that in. We can keep an eye on our tail surface, get it nice and flat, and let it dry. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. Once again, we have a Z-bend. Install our centered push servo screw. Drop it in for a test fit. This is where it gets a little bit tight. If for some reason you bump your servo and it goes out of center, make sure you recenter it before moving on. That looks good. There's no collisions. We'll go ahead and glue it in. Now I'm going to hold it in place until it's thoroughly dried. At this point, you now have perfectly centered servos with no linkage stoppers, no extra hardware, and minimum amount of weight.